Welcome everybody to our panel on the design of modern supply chains to prevent slavery. Our experts will share with you potential barriers to implementing anti-slavery measures in modern supply chains and how to overcome them, and cooperation initiatives between companies and governments to prevent modern slavery. My name is Vincenz. I'm a senior director at Bureau van Dijk, a Moody's analytics company, and I'm your host today. During the panel, we'd like to encourage interaction. We have 2 live audience polls, and I'd like to encourage everyone to send their questions via the Q&A functions in the bottom in Zoom, and we'll pick them up and answer them. So let's start with the first polling question. How empowered do you feel to influence the architecture of your supply chain? And while we wait for the results to come in, I'd like to ask our experts to briefly introduce themselves. Katharine, do you want to go first, please?
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katharine Bryant. I am the lead of European engagement at Walk Free, which is an anti-slavery organisation headquartered in Western Australia. We were founded and funded by a West Australian businessman called Andrew Forrest, and we're also the holders of some of the most comprehensive data sets on modern slavery, primarily through the Global Slavery Index. My role is looking at what governments are doing to respond to modern slavery across 167 countries, as well as looking at some of the results from our analysis of the statements produced under the UK Modern Slavery Act.
Thank you very much, Katharine, for joining us. Alex.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alex Trautrims. I am the Associate Director for the Business and Economies program at the University of Nottingham's Rights Lab. We're based in the United Kingdom, and we pride ourselves to be the world's largest research center on modern slavery.
Perfect. Georgie, do you want to go next, please?
Yes, thanks, Vincenz. Hi, everybody. My name is Georgie, so I'm Senior Director, Global Account Director in charge of the relationship with some of our largest customers, and especially working on some many topics around procurement, so KYS and broadly speaking compliance. Needless to say that investigating around modern slavery is a key topic for our customers. So happy to talk deeper into details about it today.
Super, thanks a lot. Let's take a look at the results. So most people feel somewhat empowered. Katharine, let's start with you to comment on the results and maybe also give us your view on how companies collaborate with each other and with governments with regards to preventing modern slavery.
Thank you. Yes, I think first of all, I'm not surprised by the poll results on the screen. The fact that the majority of people feel somewhat empowered, and there's actually still quite a high proportion not feeling very empowered at all. I would just say that's very common across all of our assessments of the Modern Slavery Act statements. We know that it is very difficult to try and investigate supply chains to try and identify incidents of modern slavery and to take preventative measures. I will say, though, that it is a very present and real risk that we should also be engaging with. At Walk Free, we produce the Global Slavery Index, as I mentioned, which estimates that there's some 40.3 million people in modern slavery around the world. 25 million of those are in forced labour, and 16 million of those are in the private economy. So this is a very real risk. There's also increasing regulation around the world focusing on this. The UK Modern Slavery Act I've mentioned, which requires companies to release statements on what they're doing to tackle modern slavery in supply chains. That was from 2015. There's also the Australian Modern Slavery Act, which was put in place in 2018, and companies will be starting to report under that starting from March next year. We're also starting to see investors starting to be much more interested in this topic. So yes, there's lots of pressure to try and look at supply chains to make sure forced labour and modern slavery isn't occurring. And just to your second question around collaboration, we see that some of the most successful responses through the Modern Slavery Act statements are those where it's industry or sector specific initiatives where people are coming together in a pre-competitive space to share learnings about what they're doing to respond to modern slavery. And that's something that I think is really encouraging in this space. And then looking at the role of kind of governments and business collaboration, both the UK Modern Slavery Act and the Australian Modern Slavery Act were a result of business coming together, working with civil society to ask governments to put in place this regulation to level the playing field, to make sure that everybody was being subject to the same reporting requirements. So there are some encouraging initiatives there around collaboration, which I think is very important in this space.
Great, thank you, Katharine. Alex, you as a researcher and a supply chain expert, what do you think around empowerment in the space? What's your view?
Yeah, so I'm really pleased we got 73% in the room are actually at least to some level empowered to make changes in their supply chain. So you exactly the people I want to talk to, and the 26%, we need to make sure you become more empowered as we go forward. We know that the way supply chains are designed is fundamentally influencing the occurrence of modern slavery in supply chains. And the decision-making power, whether you're empowered to change the architecture of your supply chain, to choose certain suppliers or deselect them, that is absolutely essential and in the fight against modern slavery. So we need to think about what is your supply chain looking like at the moment? Where is it exposed to modern slavery? And what can we do about that? And there's quite a lot that we can do.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. Georgie, maybe you can give us the perspective what your customers are thinking about that topic and what they do to prevent modern slavery in supply chains, and maybe also how they use data to do that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, one of the key topics, as Katharine mentioned, is about the regulation. We can clearly see that nowadays regulation is really on top of topics like anti-money laundering or the standing around CSR topics. But I think there is still a long way before having such a level of regulation around modern slavery, but I would say it's in good progress. About this empowerment, for sure, to engage such a project, you have to, I would say, try to sum up with two main challenges. The very first one is about getting the knowledge, getting the data, for sure, which is part of our job. And what I'm saying so is about most of the time, it's pretty easy, but I mean, you for sure need to work on, but it's pretty easy to starting to get an accurate picture of your direct level, your first level of your supply chain, I mean, your direct supplier. So, I mean, it's a company starting to be quite on top of this topic, but most of the time, the key challenge is about the supplier of your suppliers. Then you're starting to get to the second level of your supply chain, which is starting to be more a nightmare because it's balanced between how to get the data, but then you're starting to talk about confidentiality, about asking about your own supplier. Could you please share your list of your own supplier? So we're starting to see good progress around food industry, for instance, but for other reasons. But most of the time you are able to track more information about the supply chain. The second, there are many, but one of the second challenge would be about the top management. I strongly believe that and it's for most of the main key project within a group, is how your top management is involved in this topic. First, to get some budget, because it's all about find some tools and some budget. And second, about how you can leverage level of knowledge within your organization.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. Let's take a look at the barriers. What common barriers do you see when organizations are attempting to implement anti-slavery measures in supply chains? Maybe start with Alex this time. What's your view from the research side on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first barrier is always to actually just understand where you are actually exposed to modern slavery. Where is your biggest risk? Is it within your own operations? And actually, often people don't realize, that their office is cleaned at 2 a.m. in the morning by someone they've never spoken to. So there may be modern slavery risks in your own organization that you're just not really aware of. And then, as Georgie said, you go through the tiers of your supply chain. So you're looking at your tier 1, tier 2, at their subcontractors, and you start looking where things are coming from. And many companies will find that actually their modern slavery risk is a lot further down the line, but actually they're quite an important part of that industry, or that is a major raw material that they are sourcing for their products. So they really, have power to influence a particular industry. So the first point, it is creating that visibility, understanding what your own operations and supply chains look like, and understanding that from a modern slavery vulnerability perspective. Where are workers very, very vulnerable, easy to exploit? And then, of course, the next step is what you do about it. And usually it needs a cross-functional initiative in your business. So someone needs to take ownership, but it doesn't just sit in one individual function. And so that first bit really is, to create a community within your own business that is working on modern slavery. And that should be, that should be legal, that should be compliance, that should definitely be supply chain management, procurement, HR, and a range of other allies that you can find across the organization.
All right, let's from what I understood, understanding is the first one, visibility and ownership in the organization, from what I heard. That's very, very interesting. Katharine, would you like to comment next on the barriers of implementing anti-slavery measures into supply chains?
Yes, definitely. I think just to echo what Alex is saying, it's definitely about understanding where the greatest risk occurs. And we often hear from companies through our various initiatives that access to data is one of the bigger barriers that we see of really identifying where those risks occur. Now, we house a lot of data at Walk Free through the Global Slavery Index, and all of that is focused at the kind of national level, at the nation state is our unit of analysis. So we are able to kind of look at where there is high risk in kind of specific geographies. And we're starting to now also plug that in with sector-specific data. So we have some data on fishing industry, for example, and the cocoa industry. And it's that kind of desire for really granular data that is important to try and identify those risks assessments. And then I would just also say, to Alex's point, I completely agree around the importance of having this kind of cross-functional team, and also making sure that there are C-suite representatives that are really engaged in this issue. And that's something that's been very important with the UK Modern Slavery Act, with reporting. Is one of the reasons it was a game changer is because it required senior leadership to actually sign off on the statement and have that conversation at the very highest levels, so that modern slavery wasn't kind of sidelined into a CSR component. It actually was a cross-company response. So I think they are both some of the challenges, but also opportunities, I think, as well, as in responding to these forms of exploitation.
Thank you very much. I think that's should be very good for Georgie to come in. So you talked about sponsorship in the organization, data, geography, sector data, granularity. Georgie, when you talk to your customers about modern slavery, who are the people you normally talk to? Who are the sponsors in the organizations, and which kind of data do they use?
Yeah, I would say first it's still not so easy. I mean, it's not like we have one dedicated person within the organization. It's it's fine, because sometimes you have some very nice conversation, meaning you need to onboard many people. One of the first type of population, I would say, is no doubt the procurement guy, the procurement department, because they are the very first, most of the time, people in direct contact with the company. So as Alex mentioned, first, just when you onboard a very new supplier, first make sure that you've got like your checklist and check a couple of items. But then will come the problem that Katharine mentioned about the data availability, because no doubt that, for instance, in a couple of, I mean, broadly speaking, in Europe, you can get some information, but sometime in the other country, and the things are supply chain are worldwide topics. In some country and region, it's very, very difficult to get at least confirmation that the company does exist. So yeah, first I would say the procurement, then you have the compliance department. I was talking about them. No doubt that if you talk about risk assessment, especially focusing on compliance, then modern slavery, environment, or other topics directly will come on the table. And it's good to see that we speak more and more about it with the compliance department. And you have the CSR department as well. And now you have clearly some dedicated department, only in very, quite big, important group right now, but no doubt it will progress as well. So, and the top management. So you can see it's like procurement, compliance, CSR, top management. It's a fantastic topic, and you need many people involved for that now, because it's really change in the mentality, but change in the process as well. So it's a huge change most of the time for company. You want to go to improve such a modern slavery prevention within the organization. So you need to onboard many different departments.
All right, thank you very much, Georgie. I have a question now. We have heard that governments are involved, obviously, investors, the company itself, sponsorship inside the company. What about the customers and consumers? Is there some kind of ground roots movement as well that puts pressure to organize supply chains more compliant, or is this not really a topic in your point of view? Maybe Katharine, you're nodding. You want to go first?
I am nodding, yes. Very keen to go first. Definitely, I think there is consumer pressure for ensuring that no one is harmed in the making of any goods or services that people are purchasing. And I think that's increasing more and more. We saw the reaction to Rana Plaza, for example, more recently with COVID. There has been a real outcry where workers in supply chains are exploited. And then that flows through into the goods that we are purchasing. At Walk Free, we're very vocal about this, particularly looking at certain risky sectors such as the garment industry, to make sure that we're doing no harm. And this is obviously very important with the UN guiding principles as well, making sure that they're being implemented. So I think there is consumer pressure, and I will just say from some of the research that we've been doing, the statements produced by companies that tend to be better are those companies that are consumer facing and perhaps have had some kind of exposure to this form of exploitation within their supply chains, and that kind of motivates them to take more action, which suggests that there is some consumer pressure there.
All right, Alex, what's your view on that one?
Yeah, I mean, we know that consumers are, responding to ethical aspects. But I think also consumers rightly expect that they purchase products that are free of exploitation. We wouldn't accept to buy products that are falling apart a moment after we bought them. So why should we accept buying products that people are enslaved to make them? So I think there is a consumer expectation. But also I think consumers are putting that responsibility onto businesses, because, all of us, if every time we are, biting into a chocolate bar, we actually would start looking into, where's this coming from, right? All these different ingredients that go into these products. Yeah, you can't place that burden on the consumer, right? So the consumer would rightfully, hold companies to account and hold companies responsible for actually understanding their supply chains and understanding where their things are coming from.
All right, thanks a lot, Alex. Let's share the second poll question, if that's okay, and maybe already comment on, do you have all the tools you need to confidently assess your exposure to modern slavery risk? I think that should be something for you in the first place, Georgie. What are your customers saying about assessing exposure?
Yeah, again, I think for that you have like two types of researches, analyses you can manage. The very first is about your current supply chain. So you've got the current picture, and you need some tools and some data, as we mentioned before, to analyze your current portfolio. But then, world is changing, and and I think with the COVID context, we changed quite a lot around supply chain. I have in mind, the pharmaceutical example. I know that we heard about big group saying that they will not stop, but probably more source suppliers in Europe instead of APAC. So I think you need to tool for onboarding new suppliers as well, because most of the time that's where it's even more tricky, because it's supplier you don't really know and you're not dealing with them for quite a long time. So in your current organization, regarding the tools which are already in place, you need to cover these two aspects. And just a very last point, I think you have to think about who will use this tool. And most of the time, again, will be probably the procurement department who will use it. So it's not about adding another layer of software, because they already have one tool for financial risk assessment, compliance assessment, CSR assessment. So it's like, it's really time consuming. So you need to think about how I will implement this tool or the data in either current tool or very, very easy, friendly solution to use. I think it's key on the user experience perspective.
So maybe looking at the results of the poll, probably not a massive surprise on our side. Maybe Alex, I'm gonna ask you first, and maybe also bridge the gap to the fact and the topic of commoditized labor and the impact on commoditized labor that we have at the moment.
Yeah, so taking up the point from Georgie is actually, when you start working on modern slavery, you actually start learning a lot more about your supply chain on your organization. And it is, when you speak to production managers and you speak to other people in your organization, you actually they probably got quite good gut feelings where problems may be. And they often tend to be in areas where labor is just a commodity. Usually in your procurement categories that are competing purely on price. Where people are easily replaceable, because these are workers that are, the most vulnerable to exploitation. So I think as a first step, once you've set up your cross-functional team, have a look where in your supply chain, where in your own operations, do you actually have these often very large pockets of commoditized labor, where labor is just a commodity. And that is probably where you, first need to have a much closer look into, what's happening there.
All right, Katharine, what do you think about the tools and maybe also the topic of commoditized labor?
So just looking at the tools, definitely I think there's a need for these to be shared. And as you said, Georgie, to make these as light touch as possible. We have pulled together a business and investor toolkit, which it's mainly a clearinghouse for different resources that exist out there from both civil society and business. I'll pop the link to that in the chat if that is useful for people attending. I think just to go back to kind of the what I was saying about at the beginning around collaboration. I think this idea of sharing information across sectors, across industries, sharing learnings, getting a really detailed understanding of what risk looks like for those particular sectors is really helpful in terms of a tool that we can draw on to create a safe space for drawing on those different lessons. One thing I wanted to mention is also, and I know this is going out in Asia Pacific tomorrow, we have something called the Bali Process Government and Business Forum, which is an opportunity for that collaboration to take place. And that brings together government leaders and business leaders from across 45 countries across the Asia Pacific region to talk about how they're tackling human trafficking and forced labor in supply chains. So I would just really emphasize the importance of collaboration as one of those tools by which we can tackle these forms of exploitation.
Great, thank you very much. Georgie, do you want to comment especially also again on the maybe the tools, how they are used, and probably also where they are used? I mean, we are also talking about very decentralized organizations at time with large conglomerates. How is a big organization tackling this topic from tool side?
In tool size, I would say in the perfect world, but we are not living in a very perfect world. But yeah, you know, many big group, it's like many tools, many people who can order things. So if you want to keep control on this, that means first you need to really have the total control on your supply chain, on the procurement side, meaning that, I mean, one of the key success factors will be about centralization. Centralization for some of the key reasons are first, make sure that when you onboard a new supplier, that it's done at one dedicated place to avoid any doublons, for instance. And second is about the knowledge. As I was saying, you know, today we're talking about modern slavery, but the same for financial risk assessment, CSR risk, and all the rest. It's impossible to ask to even one department, one guy to manage all these aspects of the risk. So that part of the reason, it's good to leverage the knowledge within the group, but you definitely need some experts. So that means you need like a team who will centralize such a topic and who will work on these key topics. That won't mean that you don't need a tool that probably will manage the first level of risk assessment, checking the data on this modern slavery prevention. But then, if it's, let's say, then you definitely need some process and some people who will manage the case and then take some decision about, because okay, get the data, but then what you will do with that. So it's important to have one team who will manage the solution. I think, and from the experience we had with other customers, instead, everybody manages a little bit of modern slavery prevention everywhere in each business units and in each country and department. That's not really, I think, yeah, that's not probably the best way to do.
But looking at the results again, isn't it fairly shocking that more than 1/3 claim to have no tools at all to confidently assess their exposure to modern slavery? I mean, we were talking about investors, we were talking about government acts in the UK and other countries. Isn't that something that is quite unusual, Katharine, Alex?
I think you would probably know a lot more about many other risks that you are carrying in the organization. So I think yes. I'm guessing some of the reason is that it only kind of became a visible topic a few years ago, you know, with the Modern Slavery Acts in the UK and Australia. So I think we're still kind of catching up. You know, and I sometimes feel, you know, we are in terms of modern slavery knowledge, we are in a place where the climate change debate was, you know, 25 years ago. You know, we had a much later starting point on this issue, and that may explain why, you know, companies are not as well equipped at the moment to respond to this.
Yeah, I would just agree with that. I think, yeah, if you look at the environmental response to risk, that's obviously a lot more advanced. And I think we're just starting this journey. I mean, the UK Modern Slavery Act was 2015. We're 5 years on, so it's quite a new new journey that we're on. So I think, yes, it's going to take a little while for people to feel comfortable that they have the tools that they need on that.
All right. Yeah, and probably, I mean, ESG risk is one thing, but financial risk, Georgie, is probably something that is more imminent when we talk to our customer, because it's first and foremost about cost and other factors. Reputational risk now from the compliance side gets more important, but slavery is something that is rarely mentioned. Or what do you think, Georgie, in that space?
Yeah, I think if you did manage such a survey, not so far, yeah, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe, just on anti-money laundering with big group, we probably got the same results, more or less. And no doubt, if you ask this very same one right now, it will be completely different. And I think it's most of the time the pressure comes from two, and we already spoke about it. But the very first one is about the regulation. And around modern slavery, I think the level is quite low right now. I can see in France, for instance, they're starting to be pretty active on the field. And I read something on the European Commission saying that they will probably get some inspiration from some of the French law about modern slavery. But still, there is, yeah, in many countries, you have almost nothing about regulation for that. But the second point, as Alex said, it's key. It's about the market itself, about the consumers, about the customers. The people get more and more, sensitive, responsible for such things, and probably the pressure will, on very short term, will come from them. But again, I strongly believe that we will get more and more regulation on that. But for now, it will be more coming from top management based on probably reputation purpose that will work on it, because it's unfortunately most of the time it's business driven or regulation driven, and I think that part of the reason why the level of tools within organization is quite low.
Also an interesting point that you mentioned, because obviously consumer, we talked about it before, the pressure, maybe the NGO perspective on pressure. How do you, for example, work with the press and with institutions in the media to create a certain pressure and a voice for your topic in the world?
Yeah, definitely. So we do both engagement and also applying pressure. So through our assessments of Modern Slavery Act statements, we take a sector by sector approach. We did a report last year, for example, on the hotel sector, and looked at how they were responding and engaging with risk factors such that were very specific to the hospitality sector. That included things such as risks associated with migrant workers and recruitment fees, as well as looking at hotels as a potential venue of commercial sector exploitation. And so through that, we released a report. We engaged with various media outlets to give them some of the information, to do some exposure around that, to very much, I suppose, looking at this as kind of a stick in some ways to try and put pressure on to change company behavior. We also, alongside that, also do engagement directly. So I have an open door policy in terms of talking to businesses about what their statements reveal and how they can improve them, but also kind of linking them towards the Bali process and government and business forum to talk about a really cooperative way to try and engage on this particular issue. I would say, similar to the point I made earlier, that actually the most successful kind of statements we're seeing is where there has been an exposure to forced labor, and there has been some investigative journalism done around that. The Thai fishing industry, for example, a few years ago had an awful lot of exposure around exploitation of workers on fishing vessels, and there's been an awful lot of change that's resulted as a result of that. You can also see that happening at the moment with the Uyghur population in Xinjiang province in China, and then linking that through to global supply chains, particularly in the garment industry as well. So I think there is a role definitely for exposure and definitely for working with media to put pressure, and then also making sure alongside that you also have this engagement in terms of support for business to provide the tools that they need to then take action once this has been exposed.
All right. Thank you very much, Katharine. Alex, how does this changing maybe from the media side to the academic side of things, how does the topic find its way into the curricula of a modern and large university such as Nottingham U, and how do students react to that?
we implemented it actually quite wide parts of our curricula across different programs. So 2 years ago, we had every student started their year with a book about modern slavery, about a victim writing about her experience of modern slavery. And then we had, during the year, we had kind of meetings, we're talking about the book itself that students were reading. And of course, many students were initially not aware of the exposure. And of course, that, that has kind of created an environment where students became much more conscious, and also started looking into this in many other programs. I think we are very proud that we are every one of our procurement students is learning about modern slavery, and every one of our business school students is learning about modern slavery in the first semester of their time here at Nottingham. So I think, as we are in the business of producing future leaders, these are the people that need to know about this, and need to carry this into the businesses where they are going to work, or the businesses they're going to create. And they are very aware of issues beyond commercial, beyond just financial optimization.
Yeah, I mean, interesting looking back. I don't know, we don't even have a proper compliance course, so it's like modern slavery wasn't really on the curriculum. But very interesting. Yeah, Georgie, maybe one topic or one comment from your side. Do you actually see it as a topic that is also on the reputation side, or is it more really a cost topic for companies and your customers?
I think it's a kind of combination, it's mixed. I mean, if you just think about it briefly, it would be no doubt on the reputation side. But if you think about, I have an example in mind, probably heard about this case with Vinci, the construction company. There are some business during the Olympic game. And we heard about this modern slavery story. It was about the supply chain, it was supplier of the supplier. So as Alex was saying about the T2 suppliers. So no doubt it has a clear impact in terms of cost, but not cost, but lack probably of turnover, which is about the same at the end for the company. So I think it's it's a combination. But I can see time fly. We just to have some promising things. The good thing is when we look at the customer, we could clearly notice that we have more and more dedicated people, as I was explaining before, talking about this topic. So right now, I cannot say that it's really a dedicated guy working on modern slavery only, but it's most of the time the CSR, head of CSR group. On top is such a function who onboard this topic and is trying to get this risk assessment, which is part of their current risk assessment. But even for CSR, we clearly notice a different level of maturity between some country, even within Europe, and other countries. So I think there is still quite a long way, but it's a very good progress.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. I see we are coming close to the hour. Maybe one final statement from each of the panelists, your view and what you like to share with the audience as a final remark. Katharine, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can definitely. I think just the last comment I want to leave everyone is just the importance of collaboration and the importance of kind of looking at different stakeholders to collaborate with. So looking at the role of civil society, for example, as well as governments in providing regulation, of coming together to work on this as a pre-competitive issue. That's the last thing I want to leave you with.
Alex?
Yeah, I would say the moment you start looking for modern slavery in your supply chain, you will find it. And you need to think about what you do when that happens. And I think businesses are getting better and better in actually learning from it, sharing their knowledge with their competitors and other people in the industry. So, don't be ashamed, clear it up, learn from it, and help others to do the same thing.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex. Georgie, final statement from your side.
Yeah, huge pressure. I think, yeah, first of all, when you talk about modern slavery, from a top management perspective, sometimes you could see like not a waste of time, waste of money, but it's how it will be for, it's like a constraint, more than a constraint. But I think it's very important to see like a huge opportunity to get a better picture, get a knowledge of your process, supply chain process, better knowledge of your own supplier. So it's most of the time it will create a nice opportunity, and especially will increase the communication within the different departments I was talking about first, and yeah, level of knowledge, no doubt. So it's probably sometimes one of the challenge internally. It's how to promote, this topic, and clearly explain what could be kind of KPI, if we can say like this, that you could generate from such a project.
All right, thanks a lot. Yeah, I think we'll close here. Thanks a lot to Katharine, Alex, Georgie. It's been most pleasant and very, very interesting. Thanks everyone online. If you're interested in learning more about how our entity data are used to fight modern slavery, please get in touch via our website, bbdinfo.com, or check into one of our stands in the virtual platform. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Vincenz.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.